Welcome back to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership podcast. My name's Bill Coletti. Thanks for joining us. And as you know, these are conversations with owners about ownership for other owners. And we want to talk about methods, milestones, and mistakes. So today, super excited to be joined by my friend Lori Jones, who is the principal and owner of Avocet Communications in the Denver area. Has built a really super strong agency. And in this episode, I want you to check out two specific things that I think are most important, and it weaves through the whole conversation. One is this notion of the relationship with her dad. He founded the firm, she took over, and has now grown it and taken it to even greater heights. So the impact of that relationship weaves through the full course of the conversation. The second thing that I think is so critically interesting in this conversation is a tagline that they use. It's their main value is that they are the home of the brave. And they mean that in a client context. They also mean that in a team context. And I also think I see a little bit of it in Lori's leadership in the home of the brave. And so that notion of and they've got IP, which I love the systems. I love the IP that Lori talks about. But this scale of from boring to brave that they are trying to move clients through, it's so intentional and it's so smart to do that. And it lets our clients see the goal, see the end zone. And it's not solely about the tactics, but it's also the bigger thing about moving businesses. So check out those two things, that family impact as well as this notion of home of the brave. And also, I mentioned it a couple times, but we'll put it in the show notes. Check out Lori's content, particularly on LinkedIn and her podcast, Strategy Cast. Really, really generous and wants to make all of us better. It's not self-serving simply for the promotion of her agency. So I think you'll love the conversation that I've had with Lori Jones. Welcome back to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership. As I mentioned, we are joined by Lori Jones, who's been a friend. We've never got to meet in real life, but has been a friend as another agency owner, and looking forward to a great conversation and talking about her firm, Avocet Communications, based in, are you in the Denver area? Is that where that is?
We are in the Denver metro area, just out of Boulder.
Denver metro area, one of my favorite parts of the country. So it's a fabulous place. So Lori, welcome. Glad you're here and looking forward to have a conversation about your ownership journey.
Well, Bill, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you very much for even considering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as we chatted there at the beginning, we want to talk about ownership and entrepreneurism. And I think one of the best places to start a conversation with you is kind of the origin story. And so the website gives you about 100 words of that origin story. So I'll let you sort of expand on it a little bit. It was your dad's firm. You came in and then off to the races and grew it significantly. That's the fast overview. So I'll let you expand on that.
That's right. It truly is the entrepreneurial spirit. My father owned a trade show exhibit company, very large one, and was tired of only working on the 3D side of things and, plus the travel. So he decided to leave that business and start up advertising agency, and the agency was out of the basement of my parents' home. He was a one-man shop, loving life, being able to fish and hunt and hike and backpack whenever he wanted. And, very, very different from that, that hustle and bustle of the trade show world. And fast forward, I was in college, senior year, second semester of my senior year, I had a professional selling prof ask me to intern for him. It was during that internship that we asked my father to do a creative project for us. And during that project that my father and I were at a Chili's restaurant, chit-chatting and having lunch, at which time he said, why don't we give this a whirl and see if we can, make this thing roll together. And I knew at that time, I was a broadcast journalism major, did not enjoy it. And I thought, well, I don't have anything better else to do. So yeah, let's give this a whirl. So fast forward a few months, I had been, smiling and dialing, with those old tickler systems and just really pitching a lot of pieces of business. And we ended up finding out that we were a finalist for a regional rental car agency. And, to paint the visual, we were operating out of the basement. My office was my brother's old bedroom. My father's
This is the house
office,
you grew up in? Was this the house you grew up in?
the house I
Okay.
grew up in. My father's office was the kitchen table.
Mhm.
And we received a phone call from this account letting us know that we were finalists for the piece of business. That was on a Thursday. The last sentence out of the individual's mind that I was talking to on the phone was, "We'd like to stop by on Monday and see your office." And I thought, oh goodness, do we need a plan? We need it quickly. So I hung up. I let the individual know that we would contact them the following day with an address and all. We'd fax it to them. Ran upstairs and I was like, "Dad, we need a plan and we need it quickly." We hopped in the car and went out and found office space just by driving around and looking for vacant lease signs.
Mm-hmm.
Walked in, found an office we loved. And by the way, it's right down the alley from this building that we now own many, many decades later.
Awesome.
And next morning, signed a lease. Saturday, and of course, I sent the information to the client what the address was. We had no desks. We were using kitchen tables. So we went out, bought used desks. They were pretty ugly, made them really pretty with, crafting wood veneer tops and putting fabric around the outside with foam and plywood. Moved in on Sunday. Monday morning at 9:00, our entire family was in the agency's second space, but first real space to make us look larger than we were. And the client walked in at 9 and we had a contract at 10.
That's awesome.
And, we were with this rental car company. They fell victim to 9/11, unfortunately. But we worked with them for almost 15 years, and it was fabulous.
That's awesome. I love that. So had your dad been an entrepreneur when he was doing the trade show stuff? Was that his own venture? And is that legacy of entrepreneurship been in the family?
So he was a partner in that firm. He had some ownership in the company, but did not start it. And I should mention, prior to even starting up Avocet, he had another company, which is another story, by the way, that was airport advertising. And he would build all the display work for airports and then advertise small airports, regional airports, destination airports around the U.S. And then, sell the ad space from them. So he had that business that he also developed while in the trade show, and then Avocet. So.
And what is Avocet? Is Avocet the bird? What is Avocet?
So Avocet is my father's favorite shorebird. And I'll never forget, when he started the firm, it was Tutorious Advertising. He did not want to sound like a legal firm. So he thought, okay, we need something a little bit more creative here. And he gave me a list of about 20 names, and Avocet was right on top. And I thought it sounded, beautiful. Starts with an A, and that's what we ran with. And yes, it's a shorebird, and it was my father's favorite bird.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. So did the rental car company, they knew they were doing business with Avocet from like a naming and whatnot standpoint in those early days, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So I've often, as I talk to owners, this concept of accidental entrepreneurism comes up a lot. A lot of owners came from big agencies, and for some reason they're no longer at a big agency and maybe have a client or two in their back pocket. And all of a sudden we should start a firm. That was kind of my case, is I was sort of an accidental entrepreneur. This sounds like this has been your life journey from college on with your dad. But as you look at the marketplace and look at other owners, does that notion of accidental entrepreneur, do you see a lot of that with other owners where they sort of stumbled into it from the agency standpoint?
Absolutely. And, even though my father somewhat stumbled into it, I should note that my granddad was also an entrepreneur. He owned a trade show exhibit company in Chicago. Wow. So although my father didn't immediately fall into entrepreneurship, he did. And I think that DNA has a lot to do with it. Regarding accidental entrepreneurship, it's certainly, I would say that was my path. I never planned on working with my father. I did not plan on, I was going to work for CBS News.
Yeah,
that was going
to
be
New
my
York
path.
eventually.
Yeah. And did I have the DNA? Absolutely. Wasn't my plan? No. I do see with a lot of firms that accidental entrepreneurship happens through, a lot of times it's a creative director that believes that there's just a better way of getting things done. Yeah. And that was my father. He truly believed that there was just a better way of getting things done. And he took, the DNA of the trade show floor and the fact that, you only had 2 or 3 seconds to get someone to stop into everything that we implemented from, an integrated media standpoint. So that learning, definitely fed into, the brand that we have today. But moreover, that DNA, I think sometimes, is it innate or is it something that you learn? And I believe that it could go either way.
Yeah. No, I actually, that nature nurture question, I'm almost willing to say of the folks that I spend time with and that I talk to, it's 90-10. 90 have no entrepreneurial background in their family. Accidental entrepreneurs, exactly what you just said. They think they've got a better way or a little bit of, out of necessity. They've got a client and they got fired, they got laid off. And so they just sort of stumble into it. And maybe that 10 has this sort of lineage and history. So it's interesting that I think they nurture and figure it out and ask a lot of questions. And I've found the community generally of owners to be pretty generous. I'm in a couple of different masterminds with owners, and I feel other owners are really generous. I know that's the case with you, and kind of all the content that you're producing is pretty generous. Other than your dad, were there other entrepreneurs that have been influential on kind of you and your journey, and as you think about the decisions you've needed to make as you've been running the place by yourself or on your own?
I would say, definitely my father first and foremost.
Sure.
However, we work with entrepreneurs day in and day out. So I feel I'm in this constant ecosystem of thought process and innovation and disruption and visionary mindsets that has absolutely 100% impacted profoundly my mindset today. One thing that I think is very, very difficult with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if you come out of a firm and start your own with the ideation that you can do it better from a creative standpoint, or that your engineering is better, or that you've got a better approach for PR. What a lot of those individuals don't have is the business savvy.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of firms go out of business, because they don't have the business savvy to run the business. So one thing that I was really focused on very young was operational readiness. What can we do as a firm to make sure that we're financially sound, to make sure that we've got the processes in place? Because there's so much, IP within our own brains. How can I make sure that the younger team members coming into the firm become operational ready to deliver the product it is, the service that we deliver to the clientele, but also replicate the IP that is so, our secret sauce that is so important to creating brand continuity in the market.
Yeah, I want to stay right there. So operational readiness, is that systems and the way of doing things and wash, rinse, repeat? Is that what you mean kind of by operational readiness?
Absolutely. And what's interesting about that, yes, it's having the systems, the processes, the training, the meetings, the schedules all orchestrated so that it's, that operation that's really helping drive the business, not just the individuals behind it implementing it. And I think that structure is very, very, very important and often is missed in agency life.
Well, let me give you live from the wild a coaching or a client of mine in the coaching context when we were talking about systems, and I'll just let you then respond as if you were the coach. I can't do systems. I don't want to do systems. It will really just constrain me, and I'm really fearful that it's going to limit my creativity.
Then how will your team members know what to do, when, and how, and why? It won't limit creativity. What it allows is structure. Especially if you're a creative person, you need this structure so that your team members have a process in which they can learn through. Again, that mindset is there's so much up here in the IP. And, we've been doing this a long time. We get asked a very, very difficult question. And, 9 out of 10 times, we're going to have a really good answer for it in 2 to 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And our younger team members don't have that. And they've got to learn. And some of it might be very rudimentary, like how to conduct a competitive analysis.
Mm-hmm.
If we are writing a process on how to conduct a competitive analysis and we have to explain it each time, then how does that operational, it precludes us from moving forward because we take the extra time to explain it. The team member doesn't have something that they can look at and work from.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up frustrating people.
Yeah. So I've been writing and thinking about this concept on that and that notion of systems. I'm such a believer in it because when I really bought into EOS and traction with Gino Wickman and really bought into that stuff, brought in a chief operating officer to let me be the visionary. He served as the integrator. And that was really sort of our hockey stick moment to just liberate me because I was the bottleneck. I was making it up each time. Yeah, making it up each time. And so there's this concept of freedom from and freedom to. And so I've articulated that putting systems and procedures is not that straitjacket that some people think it is. It actually creates the freedom for me to go do other things. It creates freedom because I have confidence that that's there. Does that freedom from and freedom to, does that sort of resonate with you when you think about systems and procedures?
Absolutely, 100%. So there's no greater joy as a leader to seeing and watching a team member implement something that you've always done. Case in point, we have 57 different strategic levers that as an agency, we can implement for any given project. Have we ever implemented all 57? Absolutely not. Typically it's 2 or 3, but based on what is needed. So if I am really trying to watch my own team grow, the best way to grow is to do exactly what I'm doing, right? So moderate a session on strategic positioning. And the best way for them to moderate is for me to have a process in place that coaches them on exactly what they should be doing, read through it, take a look at it, and then we'll rehearse how we're going to manage the meeting. And then you go in and take the bull by the horns and run with it. There's so much joy. And my father had so much joy in watching me do the things he always did. It was truly a joyful experience for him. And we as leaders should have that same feeling and heart for every team member we have.
Yeah, I was on a coaching call with a small group and we were talking about values and mission statements and things like that. And someone says, how do you know it works? And I gave them a very short answer that just says, I loved it when I would create those and my team would repeat them back organically. That I would hear on a phone call with a client, and for you, it's this notion of home of the brave. And so to hear that, I don't know if you ever do hear that with your team talking to a client, but to hear that would be so gratifying. So I want to talk about home of the brave. What does that mean to you guys? How do you use it? It's on the website, but what does it mean and how do you use it?
Well, thank you very much. So it's our primary position for the agency. One thing that we believe in is people first. So Home of the Brave talks about the very bold moves that we make in the approaches, the strategies, the creative implementation that we deploy for our clients. But we also want our clients, they're the brave ones, they're the entrepreneurs as well, that are creating the new bioscience technologies or the new SaaS solution or the new deployable satellite or constellation satellite that's in market. So they're equally as brave. So Home of the Brave gives them a place to attach to achieve all their communications goals.
Okay. Is it also then from a talent standpoint that you want brave employees?
Absolutely. What a great triad, right?
Yeah.
So we've got the team, then we've got attraction, and then we've got the client. And you bet, I absolutely, when we're interviewing or taking a look at new team members, I want to know just how cutting edge they are and how gutsy they want to be in approaches. We don't want, we're not about the sea of sameness. So it's a very important point. Yes.
How do you, in an interview, and we'll talk about the other side of this in a second, but in an interview, how do you sort for that? How do you see that? How do you see bravery? And as you define it, how do you see it?
Well, certainly it's mindset and approach. And a lot of times it might be, you're looking at a plan from a client. It feels very, very milk toast. How are you going to have a conversation with them about how we can make it better? Provide me an example on something like that. You're doing a strategic analysis on positioning, and through the series of insights that you gain, you learn that their brand is the weakest one in the market. How do you have a bold conversation with them about what we need to do to strengthen it? And then how does that execution apply? So, questions about experience with that. What is a difficult conversation that you've had with a peer, a client, or your own boss about something that you feel could be much better from a bold standpoint, from a differentiation standpoint, from a distinction standpoint. It's that thought process, and having tough conversations with the boss too. It's important for the team to have those.
Yeah. You heard of this structure, and I think about it kind of in a 2x2 of there are some people in this agency in the agency life that are serve and respond, and then there are others that are lead and challenge. And I'm always pushing up into the right of that notion of lead and challenge. And the way I interpret it, that's a very nice proxy for home of the brave. You don't have to be overly brave to serve and respond. You got to be really brave to lead and challenge.
I love how you position that. I mean, it's just beautifully stated, and it's very, very true. And to serve, I mean, you definitely need those team members on a team within the
things got to get done
ecosystem that get it done. I find that I often get most frustrated with those individuals because I really want them to come to the table with the answers and not rely on me or other people for them. So they do take a lot of coaching. And that's probably one of my weaknesses is working with people like that, by the way, because I do get frustrated. But knowing that there are, again, processes in place to ultimately get to that point. I mean, it's, joyful. It's just so joyful when you see them come into a meeting and start to flex their muscles of, okay, they're hearing me. But no, I love that analogy.
Yeah. And it's been helpful. Is the absence of bravery in the firm, is the absence of bravery a terminatable offense?
No.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. So sometimes it takes time to move clients from boring to brave. Sometimes they're not ready for it. So we've got a creative scale, and it's literally 1 to 10. We call it range of acceptability. Boring is the 1, 10 is brave. And we literally have conversations with clientele about, here's, where the clients fit on this transom. Here's where you are. We know, and bravery just isn't creative. It is just really gutsy approaches to a PR tour or a PR approach too. But where do you want to go? And we had a client years ago who said, okay, we're ready for a 4 today. We want to build up to a 10 over the next 48 months, or it might have been 3 years. Show me how we're going to get there. So throughout that process, the team is learning as well. So just knowing that they vision for something for the future that is not boring, and the sea of sameness is all I care about.
Yeah, that's exciting. When you find clients, and if they had said, we're happy at a 4 and we're pretty happy at a 4 forever, do they just self-select because you're constantly pushing them past a 4 and they're just like, this isn't from a client, I'm talking about clients. Do they self-select out, or do you guys recalibrate? But if I were to say, I love you guys, but you got me from a 1 to a 4, and that's really as far as I ever want to go, because we're making money and we're selling a commodity and whatever the context is. How do you think about enthusiasm of service to someone that's kind of stuck?
Well, it's never happened. And I think why, I mean, in those situations, I think that their industry might always be stuck at a 1, by the way. So a 4 or a 5 could really be a 10 for
Cutting
them.
edge. Yeah.
We have to take that into consideration. But ultimately, the growth is on a trajectory that they can't say no. That they are like, well, we've got to continue on. We've got to continue on this path. And then, during that time, especially during a 3-year time period, that's where a lot of competitive inroads are made. So you're constantly having to reinvent and make sure that you are ahead of the competition. And a lot of that has to do with exactly what we're talking about, just outsmarting them with very bold and brave approaches.
Yeah, I love the concept. One of the areas of bravery that I see owners struggle with is when I talk about this phrase, riches in the niches. And I've sort of believed that making a conscious choice as an owner for your agency, maybe not in the first 1 to 3 years, but certainly sooner than later, is that to be crystal clear that we do X for Y and be really clear about that in that niching standpoint. And this notion of being a full service agency is a little bit of a misnomer, because nobody can really see. It's hard to see themselves for clients to see themselves. So talk about bravery in the context of niching and being crystal clear of who you serve and what you do for them. And is that something that's important to you as you position the firm for today and into the future?
It absolutely is. And, case in point, we've been through a lot of niches as an agency. And years ago, we had a lot of franchise accounts. We were working with Papa John's Pizza, Massage Envy, Neater's Bakery and Cafe, Big O Tires, all of these very, very basically hard retails that were very, very difficult to serve. Your bosses changed every year, and we weren't having fun. I was not enjoying it. And then COVID hit. And I would have thought that we were a pretty niched agency, and COVID hit, and 90% of our business went away overnight. Now, it eventually started to come back.
Sure.
But the business that really stood, had the stronghold for us was all of our B2B work. So now I'm very, very focused on those B2B niches. And we still have some retailers that I love and adore. And, what's unique about them, especially, one comes to mind, which is a thrift store. And we've grown them from 20 million to 155 million over the last 15 years. But the CEO of that business allowed us to deploy an incredibly bold approach with a brand character to really differentiate them from the Goodwills and the Savers of the world. Now, in their primary market, we're just expanding into additional markets, but now in their primary market, Savers is gone and Goodwill is decreasing the footprint. DAV is gone. So he really allowed us to be brave and bold and different. So for us, it is the DNA of just how bold the brand is going to allow us to be, what kind of industries can partake in that and want to be a part of that. And, another example, aerospace company, commercialization of space, a lot of, big space versus small space, startups. And an aerospace startup wanted us to be bold. This is the company that I talked about that said, okay, we'll be a 3 or a 4 today, and then we want to move to a 10. So when we finally got them moved to a 10, they had offers, and they had a 200 for buy. They were sold, and then we managed the buyout the buyers bought 7 different companies and had a $250 million IPO. So yes, niching is important. It can be for mindset. It can be for industry. It can be on approach. And I do like to believe that obviously we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, disruptors, innovators, and visionaries. It's really what that all ties into. So if you take a look at ARC, the thrift operation, it's a visionary mindset, but very, very bold. If you take a look at Rocore Redwire, the aerospace company I mentioned, disruption. They're about disruption, but bold. So I think that is the best way for us to niche. It's more on mindset, not necessarily only doing PR or we're the best at creative or only doing aerospace.
It's so that you went through the COVID experience and discovered, sort of B2B was sort of last man standing, and to a certain extent. Would you have made any different decisions about niche and the way you defined it around mindset? Or were there any other choices you could have made around niche? Would you be, we're going to be all in on aviation. We'll provide a whole suite of services, but we're going to be all in on one particular discipline. Talk a little bit about that. I think people confuse it that when I say riches in the niches, marketplace, or discipline, that it's like we've got to be all in on one thing and that's it. Has that ever crossed your mind? Is that Avocet's going to be the best for this particular industry at a very narrow niche? Does that cross your mind at all?
It has, and quite a bit, as a matter of fact. And interestingly, you bring up aviation. So right at COVID, we had several quote unquote transportation clients, and what happened? They all shut down.
Yeah.
And so I really would have felt that was a great and safe niche for us to be in, and it was not.
Yeah.
So I've always taken the look at this as kind of a three-legged stool, right? So we want to be able to, if it's service, we want to be able to service, three different types of industries that can be very, very successful with that service mindset. In our situation, integrated and bold. And, maybe that's, visionary local companies with, big expansion in mind. It could be some bioscience and aerospace or B2B tech or, something like within lifestyle. So, that's really affecting, not lifestyle, life-changing, that are really making changes in people's lives. So, I think you can be known for something very, very vertical, but as long as it's got, a broad implementation, like let's say we're only known for, super provocative TV spots that, Fortune 100 companies.
Right.
We're a creative shop. You just need to make sure that there's enough business only with Fortune 100 companies in order to be successful with that.
Right.
So I do believe that we could always be more niched, but the growth trajectory is says for itself that it's working. Yeah.
And it's always a challenge when we have that conversation. I'm a huge advocate of it, but I think it's not a linear decision. I think it's very dynamic, the way you're sort of describing it, the way you make your choices as an owner. So I want to go back and talk about people and talk about because they're the engines of these firms. And we as principals can only do so much without our teams. You talked about hiring. Let's talk about the other side. Share with me some of your thoughts around, involuntary, departures. How do you think about changes, firing people? How do you think about it, and how does it impact you as a leader? And then obviously you probably also think about how it impacts them as a person. So I'd just love to hit the play button and hear your thoughts on that. A difficult time that entrepreneurs have to address.
Yeah, it really is difficult. I think it's the hardest thing any of us do. I've never met someone that enjoys firing anyone. When my father was alive, we were just hand in hand. And we always had such great conversations about what needed to be done in the situation. And we always did it together, but he was the strong arm. And when when I bought him out and then he passed a few years later, still during that time period, I was able to give him a shout.
So I want to go back and continue the conversation about talent and team. Letting people go, firing them is one of the greater challenges that entrepreneurs have. I'd love to just get, Lori, just your thoughts on that process, the impact on them, the impact on you, the necessity to the business. I would love to hit the play button and just listen to you as you think about sort of involuntary departures.
It's the hardest thing that we do. And nobody likes to fire anyone. I've never met anyone that likes to fire anyone. And I also
not sure I want to meet anybody that enjoys it.
That you should hire slow, fire fast. And that I do not do well at all. It's the worst thing. It's the worst part of my job. Luckily, our employee retention is really, really strong. But I did have a time period where we had a bit of an underground and I needed to let 4 people go. I chose to let a very long-standing team member who'd been with me over a decade and a half. I decided to let Ian, someone else, go immediately, and then kind of prodded through the other 2, and I should have let all 4 go on the same day. But nonetheless, it's a necessity. And the bigger issue isn't the firing. The bigger issue is the hiring. So it's bringing the right people in for the culture and making sure that they're going to be able to adapt to process. They're going to be able to adapt to an entrepreneurial DNA where, quite frankly, we can flip-flop, on quite a bit and, change their thought process and direction and that they're going to get along with the rest of the team. If people, I think, focus more on hiring the right people, knowing that you can absolutely support that individual, then firing is going to be less of an issue.
Yeah. I've felt often that our egos get wrapped up in the firing, meaning it's an acknowledgement that we made a mistake and we hang on to people too long because we're going to fix them or something will change. And I've tried to talk to people and also sort of work it through myself that this is not an acknowledgement of my failings as a leader. If I've done everything the right way, I mean, if I'm just a jerk, that's one thing. But to just try to get my fragile ego out of it is that it's really, that's not about that. It's about doing what's right for the firm. It's about longevity. It's about the rest of the team, economic, culture, fit, and things like that. And that's why that notion of, hire slowly, fire fast, that's when firing fast, it gets snagged, is around ego. Does that resonate, that thought that we made a mistake?
Oh, absolutely. And we do have to shoulder that. But I also think people change. So who you hired on day one, and then 10 years later, what you've let them become often sets them up for the need to be hiring. So having a culture that has very prominent expectations set, and you don't have people taking advantage of you, which is what happened in my case, is absolutely paramount.
Yeah, that is critical. Culture. Let's talk about that. I think it just gets thrown around a lot. I think values kind of gets thrown around a lot. So I was with a group of entrepreneurs and we were talking about planning for 2025. And we were talking about articulation of values. And these are folks that have long established cultural touchstones and standards. But it was this opportunity to reflect, do we want to refine anything moving forward? And the discussion around values was, I, as the owner, will create some, and then I'm going to go seek acceptance or understanding with my team. And so as this notion of, do we want our team to edit our values, or do we want our team to understand our values? And fundamentally, is that do values come from the owner? And it's our firm, it's our stuff. And we're not, this was my sort of crass way of saying it, we're not going to let the inmates run the asylum. This is what we believe in, and we're going to hire and fire for that. How do you react to that in this notion that values are born out of the owner, out of the principal, and that teams need to understand, not necessarily edit the values and culture?
Completely agree. I mean, 100%. And that's a great piece of the EOS, operating system as well, is that mindset of we set the vision, we set the tone, we set the expectation, and then the incredible people that we hire need to meet up or level up to all of that. Values are a very, very important thing. And I made a big, big mistake with values, prior to the firing of this unkind clan that was within the agency. And I updated some of my values to get them to realize that they were not meeting them. So one of my values was I would never do anything that my mother would disagree with on. And that was an ethic value. Yeah. And I developed that to get them to think instead of having the right conversation with them, right? And that's where, had I let them develop values, it never would have been down the path that it should have been. And that I would expect it to be.
Yeah. One of the things I observe about you in your content mostly is it seems as though there is a value of generosity. You are generous with content, both podcasts and LinkedIn and other venues. Is that just my observation, or is that a core value when you think about values?
It is something that's very, very important to me, and a part of probably a couple of different values that we have. One of them being smart business thinking leads to smart business outcomes. And that's the IP that we have. And, I'm on a journey to help marketers be smarter and just know more and live curiously. And if we as a community, as a marketing community, as a comms community can be smarter, then we're not going to have as many black eyes or targets on our back, because that's typically what happens. It's always marketing's fault. And I very much believe that there are a lot of business strategies that fail marketing strategies. And a lot of marketers and comms individuals don't know how to recognize that there's no way that business strategy is going to succeed. It's something coming down from the board of directors to a C-suite who's not strong enough to say, you know what, your 50% growth, it's not going to happen. We can't do it right now because we only have a 2% market penetration in a landscape that only 10% of people are adopting. So it's things like that that really tie into that.
Yeah, I just love that. So play devil's advocate. So I think you said sort of a personal mission to make marketers smarter. And anybody that reads Lori's, particularly LinkedIn content, that's exactly what it is. It's really, really wonderful, insightful stuff.
Thank you.
Why on earth would you do something like that? Why do you care so much about everybody else? Shouldn't you be promoting one of the 57 things that are important to you, or shouldn't you be promoting your IP, or shouldn't you be promoting a client success? So I'm taking a very cynical view. I love it, so it's very cynical. Why on earth take that on?
It's fair. And, at the end of the day, it elevates my personal brand. It absolutely does. So if decision makers to hire an agency are looking at the leader of that agency as a thought leader, as a key opinion leader, then that does a lot to elevate the brand. About 10% of our audience are other agencies. So, along with, the bulk of them being marketers from any level of, could be a coordinator up to a CMO. And I take pride in that. I think it's a wonderful peer-to-peer approach for me to be able to, have some joy in helping these team members just get smarter.
I love it. And so team members, you're saying that in a bigger context. You're talking about the marketing team, not just Avocet's team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great.
Absolutely.
That's fabulous. Abundancy versus scarcity. So that is very much an abundancy mindset. Can you be a successful entrepreneur by embracing a scarcity mindset? Can you get there by being scarcity focused?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I don't have anything profound to respond to with it right now. I do think, abundance, those mindsets of abundance, you can try to be all things to all people. You can have, just too broad an approach with things. I think there are areas and channels for scarcity within the mix of business readiness and business operations that are very, very important. And to me, it's not one or the other. It's win scarcity, win abundance, and how do they work together?
I like that. That's some. I'm gonna have to. I like thinking about that. You watched your dad. You started it with him. You saw his career as a younger person, then got into the passenger seat as you guys took off on this journey together. You saw him leave, and both in a worldly sense, but also as an entrepreneurial sense. Mm-hmm. So how's that thinking, that experience? And you're remarkably young and have at least 30 more years in you, at least. And you got to say that anytime you talk about the R word.
The biggest laugh of the whole conversation.
We're an audio only, audio first podcast, so people can fill in the blank. How do you think about that? How do you think about, and the way I like to think about it is this context of climbing your second mountain. Your first mountain has been building this agency. You're going to go climb a second mountain, but you have a very unique vantage point because you saw someone you loved and respect go through that journey. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on climbing your second mountain and what's next for you.
And it's something that I'm very, very excited about. And I feel, I'm probably at, the boulder field on Longs Peak right now regarding that. And I'm looking at all these boulders, and each one of them is causing pause and providing, a outlook of, is that one too big to climb, or are these just too little? Should I push them aside? So metaphorically speaking, the path is always difficult. And you've got to, just use your gut and your mindset and your experience to really figure out what is the best path to travel down. The agency business is tough. It is very up and down and up and down. And, what my father taught me was that positive thinking, and I'm very much a Christian. And, I believe that he just really provides me incredible answers to which boulder I should push aside or climb over. But just having that fortitude to know that there's going to be a tomorrow. Today might be hard, but there is going to be a tomorrow is half the battle. Not giving up. I don't precisely know what the next chapter is, other than I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to impact our clients' personal livelihoods and their families, and my team members' families and their personal livelihoods. There's no greater joy than to see one of my team members be able to buy a home. Nice. There's no greater joy than to see a team member be able to go on a 2-week vacation. That means that I'm really supplying them with what it takes to build their personal ambitions and families and stuff like that. And our clients are the same way. Our approaches, our strategies hopefully create an abundance, bringing that word up again, for them, so that they, so that we retain them, number one, but they're really achieving their goals and their growth trajectories. I don't know for sure if this is going to be a third generation business. I've got 4 children, 2 are out of college. One of them has a very successful business of his own. Another one is really doing well, 12 months postgraduate, and one that will be graduating going into med school, and another one who's graduating high school and probably is going to go into med school as well. So I don't know what that path looks like. So I'm giving myself 5 years to kind of figure out what their paths look like. And then, do I get the business ready for a team member to want to purchase it if it's not going to be third generation?
Do you have emotion wrapped up into if one of the 4 of them, or if the 4 of them all decide they don't want to do it? Is that?
I'd be totally fine with it. And it's hard. I mean, my mindset has changed about that since COVID because it was just so hard. And although I love I'm sure you loved this too, the crisis comms that we were working through during that. I loved it. And I grew so much as a professional because of that. I really loved it. But from a business management standpoint, it was gut-wrenching. And I didn't know if we were going to make it. And we were celebrating our 40th anniversary, and my father had just passed. I had the buyout in place. I mean, just all this stuff. And it was a very hard time. And I don't know that I would wish that upon my children. I
That's
really
profound.
don't.
Yeah, that's profound. So sounds like when you talked about the four of them and kind of the arcs, the trajectories that they're on, that it will be somebody within the team or maybe something other strategic. Do you have a succession plan right now if something tragic were to happen to you? I mean, do you think about it in that sort of organized context, which may or may not be the thing in 5 years down the road? But do you have one for today? And then do you think about, if the kids are not part of it, what that might look like?
We do. And it is very, my legal team knows all about it. My family, of course, knows all about it because my family, the kids and my husband are the board of directors. So they know precisely what would need to be done. And one senior leader within the organization does, and then a business advisor as well. So they all do know what would be done. And, at the end of the day, it depends on what they want to do. As you know, it's hard to sell a business with the owner being the primary IP. And although, we've made incredible inroads on that, IP continuation, it would be very, very difficult to sell a business if something like that were to happen.
So we go back to content for a second. You mentioned your content does a lot for your personal brand. How do you encourage your team to personal brand build to alleviate that problem?
We do. As a matter of fact, we haven't launched it yet, but one of the things that I'm very proud about are their own blogs that they're working on.
Oh, nice.
And pushing out. And they author them, and they're on the site as authored. One thing that we want to do this next year is incorporate those into their bio sheets as well, so that people looking at my VP of Ops can say, oh, he just wrote a blog on this. This is really kind of cool. So I think it's really important that way. And that's kind of a secondary tier if you're looking at, funnel management of thought leadership regarding, do they do a podcast or a video series, or is it something secondary? I think to have another podcast, well, we could never manage another podcast, that wasn't paid for. But to have them do a podcast might be something I wouldn't feel too comfortable with. But certainly sharing the wealth in writings and speaking engagements for them, I think it's something I very, very much support.
Yeah, speaking is absolutely a lead gen engine for what we do. Are you seeing a generational shift in that, in the willingness or over desire to self-promote and self-publish? And we talk about the influencer culture, and I've never really sort of seen this in an agency, but it just, what you said made me think about it, that people that want to over-publish and people that are just like happy to be observers and scrollers. So have you seen that culturally, generationally?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. And if I'm going through our team members, age, experience has nothing to do with it. I think it's truly psyche. So there are individuals that really just love to do it, and there are individuals that don't. And age does not matter. Experience does not matter in those situations. It's interesting. Yeah.
I wonder if that's the lead and challenge, serve and respond fits in that. If you put that mindset, that must fit. Yes,
it absolutely does.
Yeah.
Profoundly intelligent people too, who are like, I just like to sit back and do my job, and they don't even like to present in a meeting. They just, they get uptight beforehand. It's hard, and they just rather, be an incredible sidekick or backup band.
And in your culture of Home of the Brave, that's okay, right? Everybody doesn't have to be out front.
Yeah, look at Superman, and look at Batboy. Batboy is his sidekick. And Bat Boy has a very, very important role.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's important to keep that in mind, because I think I've been in experiences or been in with where everybody's trying to go grab that brass ring, or everybody's trying to do that, and the voice gets lost. And I think that's probably what I'm channeling from you in the notion of a podcast, is it could be really sort of confusing with too many different voices out there. But I think this notion of personal brand building, becoming that key person of influence, as I work with younger entrepreneurs, it's really critical that they have to stand for something. I mean, Richard Branson has hundreds of thousands more followers than Virgin. Virgin is just a brand, but Branson is like a mega brand, and the same could be said. Yeah.
But you know what's interesting about this, and this can be an issue and a problem. And we've seen it with the agency, that my personal brand has kind of taken over the brand of the agency. And we're really trying to level set that right now. And
it's working.
Well, it is working, but if you're looking at longevity, and if I go to sell to someone within the agency, we need to be considering those sort of things, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, and it is, but I very much appreciate the long-term view of that.
Yeah.
But that Branson example, Ronaldo, Elon Musk, you name it, there are individual Jack Welch. I mean,
I agree.
From back in the day.
Yeah.
And their institutions still survive, but once those principles move on, I think the institution is in jeopardy. So I appreciate the long-term view. But gosh, I don't want to miss losing your voice. So I want as a commentator, don't change too much.
Yeah, we won't. Strategy Cast is going nowhere.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's super,
right
super
here.
valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. As we wrap up, I want to talk about diversity, and, DEI has been kind of bastardized in the marketplace. And this notion of, in its simplest form, diverse points of views yield better decisions is kind of the simplest form. But the concept, and you've seen the ebb and flow of that with corporate clients, where we were all talking about it some time ago, and now we talk about it in sort of these sort of gropey, awkward terms. Talk about the basic concept of diverse voices making decisions in corporations, and specifically marketing, communications, and advertising. So how does that concept of diversity, not the political football, but that notion of diverse voices, impact the way you make decisions?
Well, I think it's very important to be able to look at all of that. I mean, if you just take a look at research, right? I mean, that's how we ultimately get to that ICP and understand what where we can be most successful. So if you look at it from a very rudimentary standpoint, we're doing it day in and day out, regardless. I've had the luxury of being a female business owner to be looked at automatically as, a diverse agency. And I feel we organically, have been there for many, many years. One thing that if we're looking at employment and hiring, it has proven to be very, very difficult for many companies because, does an individual within a certain culture want to work within a certain industry? And if you set goals for that with those two ideas in mind, what's happening now is you're not meeting those goals because that specific culture does not want to be in that kind of an industry. So back to the ICP, I think you need to define that so that you can be successful in your recruiting goals or your marketing goals, whatever it might be. I have a real personal passion for the disability community. So my focus as an organization, and we've got two brands that squarely focus on hiring people in the intellectual and developmental disability community. To me, that's the big DEI miss.
Yeah, totally.
It has nothing to do with race or creed or color. That that is something that we should truly be considering. And the more people that hire people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I think the better.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Was that born out of something personal in your family or your friends? How'd that get born? Ah, that's wonderful. I love
Yes,
that.
it is. So I have a nephew with classic autism and then a niece with Down syndrome. And both of them are very low functioning. And I look at them and I look into their eyes and I just only see heart. And they have so much to provide and to give society. And I don't want them locked up in a room all day thinking that they can't work. I want them to know, they can't work. Well, Rudy does work. I mean, Rudy works 3 hours a week at this thrift operation that I mentioned earlier. And he loves it. And he provides so much joy to the customers and the team members he works with. Nevaeh, it's going to take some time for her to get to that. She's 19 and, very low functioning. So she might, 5 or 10 years be able to work. But I just, they've got so much to provide society.
Yeah.
And we need that.
I love that. That is a gap. That is an absolute missing piece that's there, because I too have been kind of touched by that as from a family context. And it's sad and unfortunate, but it's easy to overlook. And that's unfortunate and unfortunate. So I want to wrap up. So I want to take you back to the year or two after your dad left and you were kind of on your own doing your thing. What would Lori today say to Lori then in that so early beginning of your solo journey? How would you coach yourself, or what would you say or suggest that you do more of or less of, or how would you coach backwards to the Lori that was starting out?
Yeah. It's an unfortunate situation because I felt like I really needed confident on a number two. My father retired, and I made a very, very bad hire. And that was the beginning of the underground. And I should have had more confidence in myself to build the future. And not feel as though I had to have someone there because my father was retired. Because, up until his passing, he was there every minute of every day for me if I needed him.
Yeah.
But I wanted him to, just be able to, relax and let go and not have to worry about this anymore. And that was a critical error on my part.
So is the word you would say back to that early Lori is trust your gut?
Confidence in myself. Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you feel in the journey, maybe measured by years, when you kind of crossed that bridge? Or I think you've crossed it and that you have that
I
now.
absolutely have. I think when my father passed, I became very bold in my toughness and that I did not want him watching me down, watching from heaven thinking, where is the strength I built in you? You have it.
Yeah.
He's so the reason why I am who I am today and what happened to it. And so that's when I really thought, okay, no more. And I took those very bold moves.
That's awesome. That's crossing the bridge. Yeah. That's fabulous.
That's
well, what a wonderful place to stop. Lori, thank you so much. Your generosity it just oozes out of you. And so I just so appreciate all that you do on content. And if you check out her stuff online, but just in this conversation, your willingness to share perspectives as an owner. So thank you so much for that. Wow. Thanks for hanging in for a great conversation. Lori is fabulous. I love talking to her. We met, she interviewed me for her podcast some years ago and have kind of been text and LinkedIn friends, and now to be able to learn from her has been incredibly valuable. Obviously, I'm taken with the relationship with her dad, this notion about home of the brave, but what I'm most taken with is Lori's generosity and the way she shares. So please check out her stuff. I think there's a lot to learn. I think we have a lot to learn from each other, and so she personifies that. So thanks so much for joining me on the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership podcast. See you again soon.